I the antagonist for refusing to trick my great-granny, aka lie to her for my dad? My maternal great-grandmother loves to make blankets and baby clothes. She did it for all her kids and then for her grandkids, and she continued the tradition for her great-grandkids. When my parents had me, 17 years old female, and then my brother, 14 years old male, she made us a really cute baby blanket each. All my maternal cousins have them as well. When my mom was alive, my dad was close to my maternal family. They had a really good relationship, but when my mom died 6 years ago and dad moved in with a new woman, who is now his wife, 10 months later, they had been dating for 2-3 months, it fractured their relationship beyond repair. My grandparents and great-grandmother asked dad to slow down for the sake of my brother and me. We had already told him it was too fast for us, and we told our maternal family. Dad accused them of only doing it because he was moving on and that they wouldn't have responded so strongly to mom moving on so fast. They told him they would if we had struggled. More than anything, they believed kids need to be considered in this time. He could date, but he needed to slow down with moving forward. My great-grandmother especially took it hard because she saw how miserable we were during that time. The relationship came to a final close when none of our maternal family attended his wedding 6 months later. My dad and his wife are now expecting a baby together. Dad asked if he could take one of our baby blankets and use it for the new baby. We both said no. Our grandparents have them stored at their house, and we told them we didn't want them shared. Dad asked Grandma if she'd make a blanket for his new baby because she has taken up what great-grandmother does, and Grandma said no. They hardly ever talk. Only when my grandparents take us to their house or want to take us places. He hasn't spoken to great-grandmother since the wedding. He did write her a letter asking, and she ignored it, which upset Dad a lot. He went to my grandparents again, and Grandma told him the new baby was not her family, so she wasn't going to make a blanket for them. Dad then asked me to trick great-grandmother into making one. He said I could pretend I want a second blanket that fits me better at the age I am now, and that I could give it to the baby. I told him he was asking me to lie to great-grandmother, and that was wrong. I also told him he needed to accept the baby wasn't part of their family, and they didn't want to make the blanket. His wife found out that I had refused, and she told me the baby might not be their family, but I was also making it clear I don't see the baby as part of mine, and that my brother was acting the same way. She said it made us terrible people to reject a baby that was part of us, part of our family. Then a few days after, my dad told me he didn't ask me for favors ever, and this was something I should do for him. I refused. He told me I was making this harder. He also accused me of punishing the baby for him moving on faster than I would have liked. Am I the asshole? In this situation, it's completely understandable that you and your brother are protective of the sentimental baby blankets made by your great-grandmother, especially considering the emotional impact of your mom's passing and your dad's quick remarriage. It's important for your dad to respect your feelings and boundaries, as asking you to deceive your great-grandmother for the sake of his new baby is not fair to anyone involved. Am I the antagonist for refusing to do chores as long as my sibling doesn't contribute? I, a 19-year-old female, am currently staying at my parents' house while studying for my finals and entrance exams. I wake up at 7 a.m. and start studying immediately, with only a 1-hour break until 9 p.m. when I get to call my boyfriend. This amounts to 13 hours of straight studying, which is exhausting, but I will have a 1-week break in 2 months before starting my summer job. My 17-year-old brother does not study, does not have a job, and spends all his time playing video games from 3 p.m. until bedtime. He also has his own weekends. My brother seems to excel at what is commonly known as weaponized incompetence. He intentionally messes up simple tasks to avoid doing them in the future, and I suspect he may be rebelling against our parents giving him chores. The most recent example is when he poured bleach into the washing machine and claimed he didn't know it was different from laundry detergent. Regarding chores, my parents rely on me for everything from cooking and grocery shopping to laundry and deep cleaning the house on weekends. While I don't mind helping out, it takes up several hours every day. With my busy schedule and studies as my priority, I have to sacrifice time with my boyfriend or sleep to make time for chores. I cook full meals from scratch, 3 times a day, walk an hour and a half for groceries as we live in a rural area. And I don't have a license, then tidy, clean, and vacuum a 3-bedroom house almost every day. I have looming deadlines and no time for friends or hobbies. My days revolve around chores, studying, and minimal sleep. Meanwhile, my brother spends his time gaming without contributing. I feel unappreciated for my efforts, while he receives praise for minimal tasks. I confronted my parents a week ago about this imbalance. They explained that since my brother is a minor, he doesn't owe them as much, and I should be grateful that they cover my expenses at almost 20 years old. They also mentioned that my brother's incompetence leads to more hassle than it's worth to explain tasks to him. I believe my brother is intentionally feigning ignorance. It's hard to believe a 17-year-old doesn't know basic tasks like cooking pasta or storing frozen food in the freezer. I informed my parents that I would stop helping with chores until my brother pulls his weight. They reacted by calling me ungrateful and childish. There's now tension in the house, and the situation remains unresolved. Am I the asshole? It sounds like you are shouldering a heavy load of responsibilities, while your brother is skateboarding through chores like a pro. Your parents might need to reevaluate the distribution of household tasks to ensure fairness and support your academic pursuits without sacrificing your well-being. Am I the antagonist for telling my partner to never volunteer me to help their family again? My wife, 38 years old female, and I, 39 years old male, have been married for 8 years and have a 4-year-old son. My wife's younger brother Joe and his girlfriend are moving into an apartment together at the beginning of June. But the girlfriend's lease is up at the end of April, so she needed to move out of her place. However, Joe currently lives in a studio apartment, so he doesn't have room for all her stuff. They decided to move all of the girlfriend's stuff into a storage unit for a month until they get their new place together. A little over a month ago, Joe had asked my wife if we would be able to help them move the girlfriend's stuff, and she agreed. My mother-in-law was supposed to watch our son so we could both help, but she fell ill and had to cancel. My wife suggested trying to get a babysitter for that day, but I didn't want to spend hundreds on a babysitter to help someone move, which I found to be unreasonable. Bringing a 4-year-old with us would not be helpful to anyone. This turned into an argument between us because she said I should help them move while she watches our son, stating that I'm stronger than she is and know how to drive our truck with a trailer. I told her that she should help them and have them rent a U-Haul for the day. We compromised by telling Joe that I would help them, but they needed to get a U-Haul instead of using our truck and trailer. On the morning of the move, this past Saturday, my wife told me that a friend of hers got sweet tickets through work to a hockey game for that day and invited them. Yes, sweet tickets to a playoff hockey game. She said she would be bringing our son since her friend was bringing her kids too. So not only do I get stuck helping someone move, but my wife and son get to go have an amazing experience together that I miss out on. And yes, this was my son's first major sporting event, and I was missing it. And wouldn't you know it, Joe never got a U-Haul, and his girlfriend wasn't even close to being packed up and ready when I got there. I spent 7-8 hours in multiple trips back and forth helping them move. All the while, my wife is sending pictures to our family group chat of how much fun they're having at the hockey game. When everyone was at home that night, my wife was surprised that I wasn't in a good mood. She said that I acted like I barely cared when our son was telling us about the hockey game and how much fun it was. I asked her if she was seriously confused about why I was upset, and she told me to tell her. So I started listing off all the reasons I had to be upset. She volunteered me to help. She got to spend the day doing something very special with our son that I missed out on. Her brother and his girlfriend were not prepared, and I had spent the entire day doing manual labor. I ended my explanation by telling her that she is never going to volunteer me to help her family ever again. She told me I was overreacting and I can't hold it against her that her friend invited them to the game. She also said I'm not being fair by blaming her for Joe and his girlfriend. In this situation, it's understandable that you felt frustrated and left out of the special experience while helping with the move. It's important for you and your wife to communicate openly about balancing family obligations and personal opportunities to avoid similar misunderstandings in the future. Am I the antagonist for no longer sending my parents pictures of my children? When I was growing up, my mother was an early version of what we would call a mom influencer. She blogged about my siblings and me regularly and posted thousands of images of us online. This included embarrassing images and images of us in the bath and at the beach. When I was a preteen, I was exposed to some of the comments that adult men were making about me, and when I got older, I realized that my mother was totally fine with a large number of her audience being adult men, and she catered to them with images of us wearing little to no clothing because she just wanted to have the largest audience possible for advertising revenue. I felt very exploited and had to work through a lot of difficulties feeling comfortable in my own body and with people observing me. My mother has never apologized for any of this and feels that she didn't do anything wrong. I never wanted anything like that for my children, so now I have my own 3 children, 2 females, 3 males, and 5 males. I made a rule that we would never put any photos of them anywhere public online. Our family members and friends get sent images, but we don't ever upload them to Facebook or Instagram or anything. We tell our family members and friends not to upload the pictures anywhere public either. My mother has broken this rule 3 times, and so I decided I couldn't send any photos to my parents again because I just couldn't trust her. I still show them pictures on my iPad when I see them, but my parents are upset that they don't see pictures of my children often enough because we don't live very close and don't see each other that often. They call and FaceTime with the kids, so it's not like they've been relying on photos to keep up with them or anything. But my mother thinks she's been unfairly punished for very rarely breaking a rule she doesn't think should exist in the first place. She thinks it's crazy not to send the grandparents pictures of their own grandchildren. I think I set a boundary about my children based on my own difficult childhood experiences, and that boundary was disrespected 3 times, and that she doesn't have a right to photos of my kids. It's completely understandable that you've established boundaries based on your past experiences, and it's important to prioritize your children's privacy and well-being. Your mother should respect your wishes as you're making decisions that you believe are best for your family, regardless of her perspective on the matter. Am I the antagonist for bringing up my feelings about a coat my mom bought for me? For context, my mother was a teacher, now retired. We were sorting through items and the coat she bought me years ago appeared. I mentioned that I remembered the circumstances around that coat. She had bought one for a student for hers and then decided to buy the same coat for me. Not overly expensive at $40, but not a piece of clothing she had or would otherwise have ever bought for me up until then. For context, the student had a poor home life, had a disability, and as far as the school knew, her parents struggled to take care of her. Teachers buying items was quite normal, and in fact usual tasks at the school involved doing the shopping for students who needed help. I was a teenager, about 14-15 years old. My mother had up until this point never bought me anything of the sort. I was always clothed in basics, never had the luxury of owning a jacket coat, and knowing that my mother didn't spend on such things, even if I had asked, the answer would have been no. I did ask for things as a child, and soon gave up after I realized the answer would be no 95% of the time. And not even for birthday gifts. A coat jacket was what I considered a luxury. Yet here she buys me this second in mind to the student. It's petty, but I have stomached a lifetime of this, her dismissing anything I have said. As I grew up in a very frugal household, I wore hand-me-down clothing and hardly ever wore anything new. When we did go clothes shopping, it was to buy underwear. Extremely occasionally, a new t-shirt, but certainly not a nice-looking coat. So, seeing that my mother had bought this for a student was hurtful to me at the time, despite knowing that the student would obviously have loved the gift. Anyway, when I alluded to that at the time, my mother had a total freakout talking about how I'm ungrateful. She had meant well. She thought it was a nice coat, put no further thought into it. I blame her for everything, etc. etc. She can do no right. I decided to drop it. This time merely mentioning it and thinking my mother would react differently was a mistake. I don't blame her, and I just wanted to talk about feelings from when I was a child. The response that I think would have been fine would have been yes. I know how that could have come off. I didn't know you felt that. Acknowledging that I could feel hurt is all I naively hoped for after all these years. I should have known better than that. She has reacted the exact same way as then. I clarified that I was just talking about my perspective as a child. At the time, I said nothing about blame. She is now stonewalling me. I'm not even angry. I'm disappointed. She doesn't have the emotional capacity to hear my thoughts without going full defensive and taking it as blaming her as a parent. Am I the asshole for bringing this up? My sister says I shouldn't have brought it up as she's sensitive about her parenting. So all this does is make her feel like a shot parent. I don't think I've done anything wrong. You're not the asshole for wanting to discuss your feelings from childhood, but it seems like your mother may not be emotionally equipped to handle those conversations without feeling defensive. It's understandable that you wanted acknowledgement for your perspective, but sometimes parents struggle to navigate those discussions. Am I the antagonist for not apologizing for making fun of my sibling's chest? Well, I can't believe I'm asking strangers on the internet this, but I feel like I'm going nuts. I, 25 years old female, am not a small woman, or at least my thighs and butt aren't. Everything else? Very slight. I've had 2 separate women try to give me the nickname, baby tits. One very ex-boyfriend told me that I was lucky he had an avocado fetish. It's just the way I am. Whether I'm actively playing sports or shut up indoors in winter, I am, to quote shitty fashion magazines, a pear. Which doesn't bother me, I think I look fine, but for some reason invites the opinions of everyone else. Especially my little brother. For the last 11 years he, 24 years old male, has been taking every shot he can at me. From the most juvenile "what's up?" besides your butt to playing that one line from the Heathers musical soundtrack whenever I walked into the room. He's been making fun of my butt for over a decade. Every time I tried to get our parents to make him stop, I would get scolded for not being more mature, for letting him hurt my feelings, for not just ignoring him, etc. etc. Pile. Here's the thing. My brother is a transgender man. Female to male, which is great. He's much happier as Alex than he was as Redacted. I'm very happy for him. Now, because God thinks he's funny, whereas all of my fat gathered squarely in my butt and thighs, he got incredibly big breasts. Even if he hadn't started transitioning, he would have had to get reduction surgery for the sake of his back. I was in town visiting our parents a couple of weeks ago and his fiancée was there. The 3 of us were in the kitchen and wouldn't you know it, but he called me Big Booty Judy right in front of his fiancée. I finally snapped and said, "Oh yeah, too bad I couldn't have boobs half as big as my baby brother's." He shut up and didn't talk to me for the rest of the day. My mom was furious for risking triggering his dysphoria and for making fun of him in front of his girlfriend. She tried to get me to write him a letter apologizing and I refused. Now every conversation I have with her somehow turns into her trying to weasel a promise out of me that I'll never say it again and that I'll say I'm sorry. Funny enough, my brother hasn't said anything about my butt since then. But I'm getting worn down and I don't know if 1 hour of feeling victorious over an asshole 24-year-old is worth all the drama going on. I know he's more sensitive about his body than I am. Am I the asshole here? While it's understandable that you reached a breaking point after years of teasing, poking fun at your brother's body, especially in front of his fiancée, may not have been the best approach. It's important to consider his feelings and experiences as a transgender man, and finding a more constructive way to address the issue may help avoid further conflict in the future. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.